It began on a silent road in the Wyoming winter, a place where the world seemed frozen in time until a small, trembling life refused to move. She wasn't lost. She was calling for someone to listen. Officer Emily Carter stopped that morning expecting routine, but what she found wasn't a hazard, it was a message from the wild, from something beyond words. And when she looked into those golden eyes, she didn't just see a bobcat. She saw a plea for help that would change everything. The wind swept across the Wyoming highlands, carrying the chill of late November. Highway 17 curved through miles of pine and granite, usually humming with the steady rhythm of trucks bound for Casper. But that morning, the road had fallen eerily silent. A line of vehicles idled in confusion near mile marker 212. In the middle of the lane, framed by the white breath of cold air, stood a small bobcat, its fur wet and clinging to its ribs. It did not run. It waited, trembling, eyes fixed on the approaching patrol lights. Officer Emily Carter slowed her cruiser, amber strobes washing over the snow-dusted asphalt. 11 years on the job, she had handled drunks, blizzards, even a moose that wandered into town, but never this. Through the windshield, she saw the animal lower itself, pawing at the ground as if digging for something. The radio crackled with the dispatcher's calm monotone. Unit 12, report indicates an animal blocking traffic, possible injury. Emily answered, "Copy that. I'll check it out." She stepped from the car, her boots crunching against the frost. The bobcat was smaller than she expected, young, maybe a year old. Its coat shimmered with faint rosettes beneath the grime, and one hind leg twitched awkwardly. Emily crouched low, speaking softly, the way she used to talk to her husband's rescue dogs before they passed. "Hey, easy now. I'm not here to hurt you." The creature tilted its head. Then, to her surprise, it took a halting step forward, mewing a broken, rasping sound that carried across the wind. Something glinted around its leg. Emily lifted her flashlight. A thin nylon strap circled the bobcat's ankle, attached to a small piece of metal no bigger than a coin. The light caught the engraving, SAR Unit 09. She frowned. SAR meant search and rescue. She'd seen those tags before, issued to mountain teams in the Teton Range. But why would one be tied to a wild bobcat? Her pulse quickened. The animal pawed the ground again, then turned abruptly toward the tree line, stopping once to glance back at her. Drivers murmured behind the barricade, cell phones raised. "Ma'am, that thing's got rabies or something," one man shouted. Emily ignored him. There was intention in that animal's movement, panic. Yes, but also urgency. She called the wildlife department. Within 20 minutes, a white truck bearing the crest of the Wyoming Division of Ecology rolled up beside her cruiser. A tall, windburned man climbed out, adjusting a wool beanie. "Dr. Liam Brooks," he said. "You called about a tagged bobcat to 10 full south." Emily pointed toward the forest edge, where the creature lingered in the snow's dim reflection. "It's not acting like a wild one," she said. Liam raised his binoculars, his breath steaming. "You're right. That's not one of ours. SAR Unit, you said." He zoomed in, eyes narrowing. "That's an emergency beacon tag, human issue. Someone might have tied it there." The bobcat gave a sharp chirp, almost like a plea, and trotted a few steps into the dark trees, then stopped again, watching them. "It wants us to follow," Liam murmured. Emily let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "Or it's leading us to our doom. Setter doesn't prover." Still, something in her chest tightened, the same instinct that had once told her to trust the tremor of her dog's ears before a storm. She radioed the dispatcher. "Unit 12 going off-road with wildlife biologist. Possible missing person link. Mark my location." The reply came through static. "Copy that, Carter. Proceed with caution." She holstered her sidearm, pulled on gloves, and nodded to Liam. Together, they stepped past the guardrail, boots sinking into the crusted snow. The forest swallowed the sound of engines behind them. Under the canopy, the air changed, quieter, heavier. Pine needles muffled every step. The bobcat padded ahead, keeping a careful distance, tail flicking like a metronome. Emily caught glimpses of movement just enough to know it was waiting. "You ever seen behavior like this?" she whispered. Liam shook his head. "Bobcats avoid people. This one's practically guiding us. There's a reason." His voice lowered. "If that tag's from a rescue unit, someone out here could be in trouble." They climbed a low ridge, following faint tracks where the snow had been disturbed. At the crest, the ground opened into a narrow clearing. Broken branches, a torn strip of orange nylon, and a crushed radio lay half buried in the ice. Emily's breath caught. "Rescue gear," she said quietly. Liam crouched, brushing frost from the radio casing. "Search Team 09, Ethan Cole." The name meant nothing to her, but Liam went pale. "He's one of ours. Went missing 2 days ago during a solo training run." The bobcat emitted a low cry from ahead, pacing near the edge of the clearing. Beyond it, the land sloped sharply downward into a ravine. Emily knelt beside Liam, peering through the dark tangle of branches. A faint reflection metal, maybe glass, glimmered far below. Then a sound. A weak human cough carried up through the frozen air. Emily's hand tightened on her flashlight. "There's someone down there," she whispered. The bobcat gave one last chirp, as if confirming her words, before darting down the slope. Emily looked at Liam, her voice steady but trembling beneath. "Let's move." And together they followed the little bobcat into the shadows. The forest pressed in around them, deep and still, every sound swallowed by snow. Emily's breath fogged in short bursts as she followed the bobcat's small prints down the slope. Branches brushed her shoulders, shedding flakes that sparkled under the flashlight beam. Liam moved just behind her, his boots crunching softly, the red glow of his headlamp swaying. "Keep your footing," he murmured, his voice calm but taut. Far ahead, the bobcat paused on a ledge, tail flicking, golden eyes reflecting light like twin embers. It waited always just far enough to keep them moving, never vanishing completely. The descent was steeper than it had seemed from above. Emily slipped once, catching herself on a frozen branch. Her gloves scraped bark as she steadied her breath. "This isn't any normal rescue," she muttered. Liam gave a short nod, scanning the incline. "No, it's leading us somewhere. That tag means a human placed it. And if I'm right, that someone's still down here." The words carried a weight that hung between them. The air smelled faintly of pine and metal, the forest exhaling the memory of something lost. They reached a narrow flat where the trees opened into a ravine cut by a shallow stream. The sound of trickling water was faint but real, a pulse in the frozen stillness. Emily raised her light, sweeping across the rocks. Something shimmered. A torn scrap of red fabric caught in a branch, the same color as the nylon strap on the bobcat's leg. Her pulse kicked. "Liam, over here." He crouched beside her, brushing ice away. Rescue jacket material, same weave. The bobcat stood a few yards away, ears twitching, gaze fixed down the ravine. It let out a soft chirp, almost impatient. Emily angled her beam lower. A dark shape lay tangled near the base of a fallen tree, partly hidden beneath snow and branches. "God," she whispered. "Someone's down." Without waiting, she began moving, her boots sliding on the slope. Liam grabbed a rope from his pack, securing it around a tree. "Use this," he called, then followed her down, the snow crumbling under their weight. The air grew colder, the smell sharper, tinged with rust and wet wood. The bobcat descended ahead of them, sure-footed and silent. When they reached the bottom, Emily's knees sank into icy slush beside the fallen figure. It was a man, his jacket torn, face pale beneath a thin layer of frost. His right leg was trapped beneath a heavy branch, and blood had frozen along the fabric of his pants. Liam dropped beside him, hands moving with professional precision. "Ethan Cole," he said quietly, voice breaking the stillness. "He's breathing." Emily unclipped her radio, trying for signal. Only static hissed back. No reception down here, she muttered. Liam's headlamp illuminated Ethan's face, scruffy beard, cracked lips, a faint tremor in his chest as he exhaled. The bobcat padded closer, crouching beside Ethan's shoulder. It gave a low, rumbling chirr, pressing its head against his arm. The sight froze Emily where she knelt. "It knows him," she said softly. Liam nodded. "She's the reason we found him. He must have trained her to seek humans if he went missing." The animal's golden eyes flicked toward Emily, calm now, as if certain the message had been delivered. The steady companionship in that moment between man and wild thing silenced everything else. Ethan stirred, voice rasping through cracked lips. "Luna," he whispered, barely audible. Liam leaned close. "Don't move, Ethan. We're here." The injured man blinked against the light. She did it. Found someone?" His gaze shifted to Emily. She nodded gently. "She led us straight to you." A faint smile ghosted across his face before pain pulled it away. "Good girl," he murmured. Luna pressed against him again, tail curling over his chest. They worked fast. Liam freed the trapped leg using a lever of fallen wood, and together they wrapped it tight with gauze from the field kit. Emily poured water against his lips while checking his pulse. "Dehydrated but strong," Liam said. "We can move him once we signal." Emily glanced upward. The ravine walls rose steep and silent. No radio bars, no sound of rescue. "We'll climb to that ridge, try a higher frequency," she said. Liam nodded, slinging his pack. The bobcat followed each motion, eyes sharp, protective. Before leaving, Emily paused beside the animal. "We'll bring help," she said quietly. "Stay with him." Luna blinked slowly, then turned her head back toward Ethan, as if she understood. The snow thickened, flakes spiraling through the beam of Emily's light as she and Liam began to climb. The cold bit through her gloves, her heart thudding in rhythm with each step. Somewhere behind them, the bobcat's cry echoed once a low, haunting sound that threaded through the forest and faded into the wind. At the top of the ravine, Emily managed a weak signal. The dispatcher's voice broke through static. "Unit 12, copy. Emergency medevac inbound, ETA 35 minutes. She exhaled hard, leaning against the trunk of a frozen pine. Liam looked out across the dark valley below. Through the snow, he could see a faint movement near the fallen tree, Luna circling her human, watchful and unwavering. "She's not leaving him," he said. Emily nodded, her breath trembling with awe and exhaustion. "Then neither are we." The valley fell silent again except for the wind and Luna's soft chirr, echoing in the cold. When the team cleared the ridge, Emily lingered below with Liam. "We'll track her once the weather breaks," he said. "She won't stay here long." Emily nodded, watching the bobcat move in circles around the place Ethan had lain. "I think she's waiting for someone to come back," she murmured. Luna finally turned her gaze toward them, eyes catching the last shimmer of flare light. Then she slipped into the trees, vanishing as quietly as she had appeared. Hours later, at the medical tent near the base, Ethan rested under thick blankets, IV lines running to his arm. Liam worked to stabilize the splint again, his gloved hands numb. He was careful but efficient, his brown eyes darting to Ethan's face for any sign of distress. Emily crouched on the other side, checking the flashlight's battery before shining it toward the sky. "If the rotor lights hit the beam, they'll see us," she muttered. Luna's golden eyes followed the motion, reflecting every flash of light. The small animal trembled, but refused to move from Ethan's side. The storm howled above, branches creaking under the weight of ice. Yet in the middle of chaos, a strange calm had settled around the three of them. Minutes stretched into hours. Ethan stirred, his voice hoarse. "You found me." Emily bent closer, her gloved hand resting lightly on his chest. "She did," she said softly. "Your girl led us here." He blinked slowly, half-conscious. "Told her once roads mean people, people mean help." Liam looked at Emily, the corners of his mouth lifting just slightly. "Guess the training worked." The faint humor in his voice eased the air for a moment, until a deep mechanical thud broke through the wind. Emily looked up sharply. "That's them." The first beam of the helicopter cut through the blizzard, sweeping across the ravine. Snow exploded in the downdraft, blinding them in white. "Rescue team!" Emily shouted into the radio. Visual contact established. The reply came garbled but clear enough. "Hold position. Flare on signal." Liam yanked a red flare from his pack, striking it to life. Its light painted the forest in crimson. "Over here," he yelled upward, waving the burning stick until his arm ached. Shadows danced over the snow. Luna pressed herself close to Ethan's chest, ears flat against the noise. Two figures appeared on the ridge. Then another beam joined the first, the search team descending fast. Ranger Paul Jenkins led them, broad-shouldered in his brown coat, followed by a young medic with a stretcher pack. "He's alive?" Jenkins called out over the wind. "Barely," Liam answered. "Compound fracture and severe exposure." The medic knelt beside Ethan, assessing vitals with practiced calm. "We'll hoist him," he said. Emily looked toward Luna, who had shifted nervously but still wouldn't leave. "You'll have to move her," she said. Jenkins hesitated, surprised. "That cat's with him?" "She's the reason he's alive," Emily replied. When the stretcher was ready, the medic eased it beneath Ethan. Emily steadied the straps while Liam signaled the helicopter. Luna backed away slightly, eyes flashing, then froze as Ethan's hand brushed weakly against her fur. "Good girl," he whispered. Snow whipped around them like shards of glass, but she stayed until the harness lifted him from the ground. The rotor noise grew deafening. Flare smoke rose in thick red curls. Emily shielded her face, watching the man ascend through the storm's chaos until he vanished into the light. Silence followed, heavy and unreal. The helicopter was gone. Only the wind remained, pushing drifts of snow into the place where Ethan had been. Luna turned her head toward Emily, her golden eyes meeting hers for one long heartbeat before she slipped quietly into the trees. Emily stood motionless, the flare dimming to ash in her hand. "She's gone," she said quietly. Liam looked out toward the forest. "She'll find her way home." But neither of them moved for a while, both watching the empty clearing as if it still held something sacred. At dawn, the storm broke. The rescue camp at the base of the ridge buzzed with low voices and generator hums. Inside a medical tent, Ethan lay swathed in blankets, his color returning slowly. Emily stood near his cot, her olive jacket streaked with melted snow. Liam leaned against a heater, scribbling notes. "He'll make it," the medic said. "The animal kept him alive longer than any gear could have." Ethan opened his eyes, tired but aware. "She made it out?" Emily smiled faintly. "She did, and she stayed until the end." She wanted to scrabs. Outside, pale sunlight spread across the frozen trees. The storm's roar had faded to distant sighs. Emily stepped out, her breath fogging as she stared at the line where forest met sky. For a brief second, she thought she heard it again, the same soft chirp that had echoed through the ravine the night before. She turned, scanning the distant ridge. Nothing moved, only wind and light and the faint shimmer of untouched snow. Yet she smiled, certain that somewhere beyond those trees, Luna was watching, alive and free. By the following morning, the snow had begun to melt, leaving a thin mist clinging to the trees. The world felt quieter now, emptied of its storm. Emily stood outside the medical tent, her uniform damp, boots crusted with ice, watching the rescue helicopter disappear beyond the ridge. She hadn't slept. Inside, Ethan rested beneath blankets, the steady rhythm of a monitor cutting through the soft hum of the heater. Liam was speaking with a news liaison who had arrived with the morning convoy. "It's already spreading," he said, lowering his voice as Emily stepped in. "The report Bobcat saves man from blizzard. They're calling her a miracle." Emily rubbed her forehead, sighing. You know, there's already a petition to track her, to see if she's alive. When Ethan was well enough to sit upright, he asked for them both. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and thawed air. His face was pale but warm now, his leg encased in a white cast. "I owe you my life," he told Emily, "and hers." Emily smiled, shaking her head. "You owe it to the little one who wouldn't quit." Ethan's eyes softened. She was part of an old behavioral rehab project I'd been studying before it got shut down. They said animals couldn't learn emotional patterns. I guess she proved them wrong. He reached for a photo on the table, a faded image of Luna as a kitten perched on his shoulder. She was never wild, just waiting to show us how wrong we are. Weeks passed, and spring thawed the valley. The story lingered across America. Luna became a symbol. The Wyoming Wildlife Division issued a statement promising to locate her for safety monitoring. Emily accompanied Liam on the expedition, though she told no one why. They trekked along the familiar ridges, the forest alive again with melting streams and the smell of pine. "She won't come if we call," Liam said softly, "but she might watch." Emily nodded. She always did. The wind stirred snowmelt through the moss, and somewhere distant, a faint chirp echoed. They found the spot where Ethan had fallen, the branch still split, the scar of the storm visible on the slope. Emily crouched and brushed her fingers through the soil. "She came back here," she whispered. Liam raised his binoculars, scanning the valley. "She's out there," he said, pointing. A shape moved at the tree line, small and familiar, a tawny coat, gold eyes watching. Luna stood beside a fallen trunk, her form leaner, her gait steady, but she wasn't alone. Behind her, 3 smaller shapes stumbled clumsily through the brush. Emily's throat tightened. "She had cubs," she murmured. The bobcat mother lifted her head, eyes meeting Emily's from across the clearing. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Luna turned and led her cubs into the shadow of the forest. Emily exhaled slowly, wiping a tear she hadn't realized was there. "She's teaching them the same way she taught him," Liam said softly, "that the world's not all danger." They stood there until the forest swallowed the family whole, sunlight slipping through the trees like gold through glass. That summer, Ethan's recovery made local news again. This time, he told the story himself, his voice steady, no embellishment, just gratitude. Emily and Liam joined him at a wildlife symposium in Denver, where Luna's footage was shown as part of a presentation on cross-species empathy. The audience rose in quiet applause. "It's not about taming the wild," Ethan said at the podium. "It's about listening to it." Months later, Emily returned alone to the valley. She parked her truck by the same stretch of Highway 17 where everything had begun. The road was clear now, framed in green. She walked to the guardrail, the morning sun glinting on the metal. The air smelled of pine and dew. For a moment, it was easy to imagine Luna stepping from the trees again, her golden eyes steady and unafraid. Emily smiled faintly, whispering into the wind, "You did good, girl." Somewhere, deep in the forest, a soft call answered, brief, distant, and full of life. Spring ripened into a soft Wyoming summer, the kind that smelled of warm pine and river stones. Emily drove Highway 17 at first light, the same bend where the world had stopped months before. The road was empty, the guardrail glinting like a quiet memory. She parked, cut the engine, and let the morning settle. A meadowlark called from the fence post. Wind moved through the grass in long silver waves. If Luna was near, the day would decide, not Emily's wanting. Liam arrived a few minutes later, boots crunching along the gravel shoulder. He carried a small field recorder and an older pair of binoculars, the lenses polished thin by years of use. "You sure about this?" he asked, half smiling. Emily nodded. "We come as listeners, not owners." He leaned against the rail beside her. Below them, meltwater braided through alder and stone, a soft stitch in the landscape. "Ethan's strong enough to travel next week," Liam said. "He wants to thank her here, if she'll allow it." They hiked the ridge in silence, retracing the line of the old storm. Where ice had once barked the trees, new shoots rose, stubborn and bright. Emily recognized the place by feel, not sight. The hollow pocket of air under the spruce, the bend in the game trail that turned the wind into a whisper. She knelt, pressing a palm to the earth. Warm, alive. "You ever notice," she said, "how the woods remember before we do?" Liam didn't answer. He'd found what she hadn't seen. Tracks, small and careful, curving like punctuation toward the shade. They followed the sign to a glade of wind-fallen timber. The light there came down in thin gold sheets, warm as a hand on a shoulder. Emily stopped first. Luna stood in the seam between sun and shade, leaner now, the winter's edge worn off her frame. Her coat held more copper than she remembered. Her eyes were the same old amber, cool and measuring. 3 younglings tumbled near a rotten stump, hips too big for their paws. The mother watched them the way rivers watch stones, protective, patient, inevitable. Emily lowered her gaze, giving the wild its space. "We won't come closer," she said softly, though the distance already felt like a kindness. One cub froze mid-pounce, staring at the strangers with startled blue. Luna's tail flicked. The cub resumed its clumsy hunt, wrestling a shard of bark as if it might bite back. Liam's breath eased. "She brought them to the light," he said. Emily felt something in her chest unknot, a loop of winter finally releasing its hold. "Maybe she's showing us she belongs," she murmured. The wind shifted, bringing the clean scent of water and sap, a faint trace of snowmelt from somewhere higher. Emily thought of Ethan's hospital room. The cast, the color returning one heartbeat at a time. He would stand here soon, the man who had taught roads to mean people, and people to mean help. But whatever training had begun, nature had finished on her own terms. Luna had chosen distance, chosen the soft line where human sight ended and wild confidence began. "We honor that line," Emily said, mostly to herself. A twig snapped to their right. Ranger Paul Jenkins stepped out from behind a spruce, hat in his hands, the big body of a contrite man made smaller by apology. "Didn't want to spook her," he whispered. "I owe that cat an apology. I can't speak loud." Emily nodded. No lectures, no victory laps, only quiet. Paul glanced at the cubs, his face folding into something boyish. "Never thought I'd say it, but they look like hope." The word hung there, unembarrassed, like the smell of rain before it falls. From the trees came a sound both familiar and new. Luna's low chirr, answered by the thready echoes of her young. Emily raised her eyes without lifting her head, the respectful compromise they'd learned from old animal men and older grandmothers. Luna held her gaze for a single heartbeat acknowledgement, not permission, then turned to the business of a summer day. The wild doesn't bow. It nods when it must and goes on. Emily felt gratitude fill the space where hunger had been. They stayed until the light thinned and the glade softened back into ordinary. On the walk out, Liam stopped at the ridge and set the recorder on a fence post. Wind moved through the pines. Somewhere below, a cub squeaked like a rusty hinge. "For the archive," he said. Emily smiled. "For the days we forget." The road unspooled beneath them, a long ribbon of past and next. "When Ethan comes," she added, "we come with nothing but eyes and quiet." Liam nodded. "And leave with nothing at all." At dusk, Emily returned alone to the bend in Highway 17. The sky held the last pink seam of day. A truck rolled by with its windows down, a country song trailing like smoke. She rested her arms on the rail and let her weight hang the way you do when the ache has somewhere to go. From the timber line, a short, raw call rose and faded, a sound old as the first fire. Emily answered with silence and a small, unguarded smile. "You did good, girl," she said, and the wind carried it where words have always gone, into the trees, and on. By late summer, the Wyoming plains glowed gold beneath an endless blue sky. The valley that once echoed with snow and rotors was alive again, grass bowing to the wind, dragonflies hovering over clear streams. Emily parked her truck at the new Wildlife Ambassador Center, a modest cluster of cedar buildings tucked at the foot of the range. It had been 6 months since the storm, and today, they were gathering not to mourn but to honor what had grown from it. Children and retirees milled about the courtyard, volunteers guiding them past enclosures that shimmered in the noon light. On a sign by the gate, freshly painted letters read, "The Luna Program where wild and human meet." Then, inside the main hall, exhibits showed rescued owls, foxes, and hawks, creatures too human-wary to release yet too fierce to confine. Emily moved quietly among the displays, her tan police jacket exchanged for a simple green field vest. She paused before a looping video of Luna, the dashcam clip of that frozen road. Behind her, a familiar voice broke through the soft murmur of visitors. "Never thought I'd see her on a projector." She turned, smiling. Ethan Cole stood by the railing, now walking with a cane but solid, alive. The same warmth lingered in his tanned face, his short dark hair flecked with new gray. "You made it," she said. Ethan laughed, patting his cast-free leg. "Took some convincing, but yeah. Couldn't let them start a program named after her without showing up." His eyes flicked toward the next hall, where Liam adjusted a camera rig near a podium. "Liam's already turning this into a field study," Ethan added, grinning. "Says empathy is measurable now." Emily chuckled. "He's always needed proof for what we already knew." They fell into a companionable silence, watching footage of Luna's golden eyes staring through falling snow. The crowd murmured in awe as the clip replayed her standing unflinching in front of the cruiser. Later, the ceremony began. Dr. Liam Brooks stepped to the microphone, tall and calm, his voice steady over the hum of air vents. "When I met Officer Carter that night," he said, "I believed the wild obeyed instinct, not intention. Then Luna taught us that survival and compassion aren't opposites, they're the same breath." His words settled deep into the room. Emily watched Ethan shift, his jaw tightening with quiet pride. Liam gestured toward a framed photograph of Luna on the wall, sunlight caught in her fur. "She became a bridge," he said softly, "between our world and hers." The room stood in applause. Cameras flashed, but Emily's gaze drifted to the glass doors leading outside, where wind stirred the prairie grass beyond. She stepped out once the speeches ended, letting the noise fall behind her. The air smelled of sage and warm dust. The mountains towered, patient as time. Down the slope, beyond the enclosures, was a quiet sanctuary fenced only by trust, a place for Luna's kind, open to the wild's will. Emily followed the path until she reached the boundary post, where a small plaque bore one line, "In memory of what trusted us back." The afternoon softened. She stood still, eyes sweeping the horizon. Then, from between the brush and the stone, a movement, a shadow melting into shape. Luna. Her coat shimmered in the fading gold, lean and strong. One of her cubs, now nearly grown, padded behind her, tail curling with alert grace. Emily froze, heart leaping. The bobcat paused just beyond the fence, head lifted, those same golden eyes holding her steady. Between them stretched a space too wide for words and too close for fear. "You found your way," Emily whispered. Luna blinked slowly, that patient feline acknowledgement, then turned. The cub hesitated, watching Emily one last time before following its mother into the tall grass. They vanished with the whisper of wind through sage. Emily exhaled, a long, trembling breath that felt like years unwinding. Behind her, voices from the center carried faintly Ethan's laughter, Liam's measured cadence, but here, there was only the pulse of life, untamed and unbroken. As the sun dipped, she sat on a rock near the boundary fence. She took off her necklace, a silver ring looped through a cord, and let it rest on the post. "For all the rescues that rescue us back," she said quietly. The wind shifted, gentle but sure, bending the grass toward the mountains. For the first time in months, Emily didn't feel the urge to chase or fix or prove. She simply listened. The forest answered with a low, contented hum. the kind of sound that feels like understanding. By twilight, the center's lights glowed behind her, casting halos over the new signs, the new beginnings. Emily turned for one last look at the ridgeline. Somewhere in that shadow, Luna and her kin walked freely, unseen but not lost. "Good night, girl," she murmured, voice steady now, full of peace. Then she walked back down the trail, leaving footprints that the evening wind soon erased. Human, fleeting, but grateful to have walked the same ground as something wild and everlasting. Autumn crept quietly into the valley, laying gold across the grasslands and a hush across the trees. 6 months had passed since Emily last saw Luna vanish into the sage. Yet the echo of that moment lingered in everything she touched. The Wildlife Ambassador Center had grown busier by the week. Students now came from across the country to learn about empathetic response behavior in wild species. They called it the Luna effect. Emily, who once hesitated to speak on camera, now found herself standing before classrooms, telling a story that still trembled when it reached her throat. She wasn't trained, she would say. She was trusted, and will help Sevens. One crisp morning, she walked the path leading from the main office to the outdoor enclosure, where new rescues were being introduced. The sky hung wide and clean above the peaks, filled with migrating birds slicing south. Liam waited by the fence, his ever-present notebook tucked under one arm. "2 new arrivals," he said, gesturing toward the far corner of the field. A young mountain lion cub peeked out from behind a rock, wary yet curious. "Abandoned near a construction site," he added. Emily crouched, her eyes soft. "She'll learn," she whispered. "They always do." Inside, the visitor hall buzzed. A mural of Luna now covered the east wall, her amber eyes painted in sweeping strokes of light. Children pressed their palms against the glass under it, listening to docents speak about trust and coexistence. In one corner, a new exhibit displayed Ethan's gear, the tattered rescue jacket, the cracked radio, the broken tag engraved SAR Unit 09. He sat nearby in a folding chair, speaking to a small crowd of volunteers. His cane leaned beside him like an old friend. "I used to think saving animals was about control," he said. "Turns out, it's about surrender." Later that day, the 3 of them, Emily, Liam, and Ethan, walked down to the lower meadow. The afternoon was windless, the air heavy with that autumn scent of pine and earth. From the ridge, they could see the valley spread like an old map, rivers glinting, grass rolling, mountains leaning close. Liam spoke quietly. "You realize this all started because she asked for help, the only way she knew how." Emily nodded, "And because we were finally ready to listen." A hawk circled high above, silent but sure, its shadow passing briefly across their faces. News of Luna's legacy spread far beyond Wyoming. National networks picked up the story again, this time framed not as miracle but as model how empathy could be applied to conservation. Wildlife centers across the U.S. began using Luna's image on banners and brochures. Connection is survival. Even the state governor commissioned a new license plate featuring her silhouette. Emily found it strange to see her old dashcam footage looping on national television again. The snow, the headlights, the small wild figure refusing to move, but she no longer felt the ache it once brought, only reverence. As winter teased its return, the Ambassador Center hosted a memorial evening. Lanterns lined the walkway, glowing soft against the early frost. Emily stood on the wooden stage beneath strings of light, her uniform replaced by a wool coat. The crowd was quiet as she began. "Luna didn't belong to us," she said. "She reminded us that we belonged to something bigger." Her voice steadied, carrying into the night. When she walked away, it wasn't an ending, it was an invitation to learn how to follow without taking. The audience remained still for a moment, then rose to their feet, applause mingling with wind. After the speeches, Ethan joined her by the fence overlooking the dark fields. "I still hear her sometimes," he said with a grin. Emily smiled back. Maybe that's the point. Behind them, Liam recorded the sound of the lanterns rustling in the breeze. The night had that same quiet electricity as the storm's aftermath, a stillness that hummed with unseen life. Stars emerged one by one, each one bright enough to reflect in the frost. "She taught us to see," Liam said softly, "and to keep looking." As the crowd dispersed, Emily remained, her breath visible in the cooling air. She could almost imagine movement on the far ridge, a flicker between shadows. Whether it was memory or something real no longer mattered. What mattered was the knowing that the bridge between wild and human was not a boundary but a pulse, constant and enduring. She closed her eyes, listening to the land's low rhythm. Somewhere in that quiet heartbeat, she felt Luna's presence alive in the world, in every creature that dared to trust, and in every person willing to answer. At dawn, she walked back along the empty highway, frost crunching beneath her boots. The mountains blushed with the first light of day. For a long moment, she looked toward the forest and smiled. "Goodbye, Luna," she whispered, and then, almost laughing, corrected herself. "No, see you around." The wind rose, carrying her words into the distance, where wildness waited not apart, but alongside. Winter returned to Wyoming without the cruelty of the year before. It came soft, slow, and familiar, like an old friend who knew when to whisper and when to stay quiet. The peaks wore thin crowns of frost, and the valleys below held a hush that made every sound sacred. Emily sat in the office of the Ambassador Center, now warmed by the low hum of a heater and the ticking of a clock that had belonged to her father. Papers lay spread across her desk, reports, letters, and handwritten notes from school children thanking Officer Carter and the Bobcat named Luna. She smiled as she traced the words, her hand steady but lined with time. She was leaving soon, retirement papers signed, desk half empty but not before one final story. That evening, the snow began again, small flakes drifting against the window. Emily set up a small camera, the kind used for oral histories. She adjusted the lens, then sat in the chair across from it, the light painting soft lines across her face. "My name is Emily Carter," she began, her voice quiet but sure. "And this isn't a story about me, it's about a promise." She paused, glancing at the old silver tag that hung beside her coffee cup. SAR Unit 09. Years ago, a bobcat stood on a road and refused to move until someone listened. Because of her, a man lived. Because of her, I learned that compassion isn't something we teach animals, it's something they teach us. Her voice grew softer, steadier. People still ask if she was trained, or if it was a miracle. The truth is simpler. She acted out of memory, trust, and instinct, the same things that guide all of us when fear falls away. We spend our lives trying to separate wild from human, when maybe they were never meant to be apart. She smiled faintly. Luna showed us that bridge. All we had to do was cross it. Later, she walked the halls one last time. The center was quiet now, only the hum of night lights and the low wind outside. In the main corridor hung the mural of Luna, her golden eyes bright as ever, her red strap glinting in painted sunlight. Emily stopped beneath it, fingertips brushing the cool wall. "Thank you, girl," she whispered, "for showing me what courage looks like when it has no name." Outside, the snow had thickened into soft silence. The world glowed under the moon, every branch wearing lace. Emily followed the path to the edge of the enclosure, where the boundary met open land. Beyond the fence, the forest stretched, alive and endless. For a long while, she stood there, her breath fogging in the cold, her coat dusted with snow. Then, from deep among the pines, came a sound, a low, familiar chirr, carried like a secret through the air. She closed her eyes, smiling through the chill. Morning found her there, sitting on the fence rail, a thermos of coffee steaming in her gloved hands. Liam approached quietly, gray in his beard now, notebook tucked under his arm. "You didn't go home," he said. She shook her head, eyes on the ridge. "Didn't feel right to say goodbye in a hurry." He smiled. "You're staying for the sunrise, then?" She nodded, always. Together, they watched the first light spill across the valley. For an instant, in the distance, something moved, a shadow, graceful and low. Whether real or remembered didn't matter. The world had learned to listen. Years later, the video Emily recorded would play at classrooms and conferences across the country. Her voice, older but clear, would echo through speakers. Compassion knows no species. Students would look up at the screen, where Luna's golden eyes met theirs, and for a heartbeat, they'd understand something wordless that the wild doesn't need saving as much as remembering. And in that remembering, humanity might just find itself again. 10 years passed since Luna first blocked a road and changed the way a nation listened. The Ambassador Center had grown into something far larger than Emily or Liam had ever dreamed. A network of sanctuaries stretching from Montana to New Mexico, each one carrying Luna's name. Her mural now stood in schools, park stations, and hospital wards. The phrase, "connection is survival," had become part of public education, woven into the language of science and compassion alike. Emily, older now and long retired, spent her days by the river cottage she'd built near the valley. It was quiet there, the kind of silence that let memory breathe. Each morning, she walked the banks with her cane, tracing where the water met the grass. Some days, she would still spot shapes in the distance, a flash of tawny fur, a rustle in the sage, and smile, letting the thought remain unspoken. The world had learned not to demand proof for every miracle. One afternoon, she was joined by a young woman carrying a camera and a notepad, her name tag reading, "Dr. Sophia Hale Wildlife Research Program." "You're Emily Carter," she said with awe. Emily laughed softly. "I used to be." Sophia smiled. "Your story started this program. We're here to expand it." They walked together toward the ridge. Sophia explained how the Luna Initiative had evolved. New technology tracked migration routes by sound recognition rather than GPS tags, learning animal distress calls to dispatch rescuers automatically. "We trained the AI on your Bobcat's voice," Sophia said. Luna's call became the model for recognition algorithms worldwide. Emily paused, overwhelmed. "So she still speaks?" Sophia nodded. "She's guiding us even now." The older woman blinked hard against the sunlight, hiding her tears with a small smile. "Then we listened well." Later, they drove to the new mountain observatory where researchers monitored field transmissions. The walls were lined with sound wave graphs and gentle hums of data servers. Liam's old notebook sat framed in glass, the first sketch of Luna's paw print drawn inside. Sophia pressed a button, and the room filled with recorded calls from around the continent: wolves, owls, elk, even a distant puma. Then, among them, a soft, distinct chirr, the same rhythm Luna once used on that icy highway. "That's her," Emily whispered. The sound filled the room like a heartbeat, steady, alive, eternal. The next morning, the team invited her to record a new message, a dedication for the program's global launch. Emily sat before a microphone, hair silver and loose, voice gentler now but unbroken. "We built machines to listen," she said. "But what matters is what we do after we hear. The wild doesn't ask for words, only respect." She paused, eyes glistening. Luna spoke in her way. "This is ours." The control room stayed silent when she finished, then erupted in quiet applause. Outside, dawn stretched pale and gold across the valley, as if the land itself were listening. By afternoon, Sophia drove Emily back to her cottage. They passed the ridge where the old rescue once took place, now marked by a small bronze plaque. Here began the bridge between worlds. A young bobcat darted across the road and vanished into the tall grass. Emily smiled knowingly. "The story repeats itself," Sophia said. "As it should," Emily replied. "The wild keeps its promises." At sunset, Emily sat on her porch with a cup of tea. From somewhere deep in the forest came that same quiet chirr, now older, perhaps echoed through generations. She leaned back, eyes closing. The warmth of the day gave way to the cool sigh of evening, and she thought of Luna not as a miracle or symbol, but as a messenger who had turned silence into understanding. When the stars appeared, she whispered, "Still listening." That night, in classrooms across the country, Her new message played alongside Luna's call. Children heard it and fell quiet, their screens glowing with the outline of a bobcat's face. Some of them would grow up to become rescuers, scientists, or poets. Others would simply remember that wild things feel, and that empathy once found never fades. And somewhere beyond that shared silence, the world exhaled again, alive and listening. The winter that followed was kind, the kind that whispered more than it howled. Snow lay thin over the Wyoming valley, letting the golden grass breathe through it. Emily Carter sat by her cottage window overlooking the same line of pines where Luna had first vanished years ago. She was older now, her silver hair falling loose around her shoulders, but her eyes still carried that steady warmth, the same calm that once faced a frightened bobcat on an empty road. The morning sun broke across the frost, slow and forgiving. On her desk lay a worn journal bound in green leather, embossed faintly with 3 words, "The Bridge Between Worlds." She opened it, thumbing through pages filled with her handwriting notes, sketches, and bits of letters from people whose lives had been touched by Luna's story. Scientists, children, hikers who had left food at trailheads just in case she passed again. Emily smiled faintly. "You started something far bigger than me," she murmured to the air. She rose, wrapped herself in a wool coat, and stepped outside. The snow was soft beneath her boots, the world bright with that perfect morning quiet. Down by the edge of the field, frost shimmered like scattered glass. By noon, she reached the old highway mile marker 212, the place where it had all begun. The guardrail had been replaced since then, newer steel glinting in the light. A small bronze sign stood there now, in memory of Luna, whose courage taught us to listen. Emily ran her glove over the letters, her breath fogging in the cold air. She remembered the sound of the wind that day, the pulse of the cruiser lights, the trembling creature that refused to leave the road. It all felt like yesterday and a lifetime ago. She smiled softly, whispering. As afternoon stretched, she walked into the forest trail beyond the highway, following the same line where Luna had once led her. The snow crunched beneath her steps, birds darting through bare branches. The trees were older now, some split by storms, others sprouting anew. Near the old ravine, she stopped. The stream below was frozen, but sunlight danced over its surface like living fire. Emily closed her eyes and listened. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, faintly, came a sound she had waited years to hear. A low chirr, familiar and distant, carried by the wind through the trees. Her breath caught. She turned toward the sound. On the far ridge stood a shape graceful, poised. A bobcat, larger than Luna once was, her coat rich and unscarred, her eyes bright with youth and recognition. Beside her, 2 smaller cubs lingered, curious and unafraid. Emily's smile deepened, tears warming her eyes. "Hello, sweetheart," she whispered. The bobcat tilted her head, as though considering, then gave a soft call, the same note that had once echoed down a highway in a snowstorm. Emily raised her hand in greeting. The bobcat blinked once, then turned, padding slowly back into the pines. The cubs followed, their tails flicking like brushstrokes of light. Evening came golden and still. Emily sat on a fallen log by the stream, her cane resting against her knee, her face tilted toward the last light. "You came full circle," she said quietly, "and so did I." The mountains reflected in her eyes, endless and calm. For a while, she simply breathed, letting the cold and memory mingle in the fading day. When darkness fell, stars gathered early. She lit a small lantern, placing it beside the stream. Its reflection shimmered across the ice, joining the constellations above. "For Luna," she whispered, "and for everything wild that ever trusted us enough to ask for help." Her voice trembled but never broke. The wind rose once more, carrying her words through the forest, over the hills, into the deep quiet where language ends. By dawn, the lantern's flame had gone out, leaving only the scent of pine and the print of a woman's boots leading back toward the highway. Weeks later, Hikers would find the journal she had left by the plaque, its pages filled with her story, her handwriting steady to the end. The final line read, "All bridges hold, if built from kindness." And above that line, a small paw print pressed in dried mud light. Perfect. Eternal. If this story touched your heart, just drop a 1 in the comments, or a 0 if it stayed quiet inside you. Don't forget to subscribe, there are more gentle stories waiting just beyond the trees.